One of the bad things I go on seeing in political debate is the way people will argue against communism by saying that the redistribution of wealth doesn't work. When in truth, the better argument to have against communism is that whenever communism has become all-powerful, whenever Marxism has been able to fully control the show, the end result has never been simply the full redistribution of wealth. There is usually a dictator that takes over, that takes on most of the wealth, and then leaves people often with fewer human rights than they began with, if not, if they're alive at all, and in the case of Mao, millions of people died, and even though he promised that he was going to save the problems of China, in Cambodia, millions of people died, and art was literally made illegal, even though today you'll see artists trying to get communism to become the norm because they think it will give them better funding. I think, I think the way things went in Cambodia kind of proves that that's not necessarily the case, and certainly you can argue, well, this time could be different. It could be. But unless you're actually going to do something to ensure that it's different, you have no reason to think it'll be any different. And in fact, historically, communism always starts out making a lot of false promises about what the end result will be, that it ultimately never lives up to. So even if they're telling you right now, oh, under our power, you would be better funded, that's not necessarily how things will be in the end for you. And so I invite people who are opposed to Marxism and communism to stop arguing against it by, arguing with what communism claims to be. The real problem with communism is that it never does live up to its own claims. Historically, wherever it's gone, it never does what it promises. It never actually alleviates people from their troubles and poverty. It usually exacerbates the poverty of a country. It promises progress, but typically it ultimately delivers the exact opposite. It delivers regress, and it delivers destruction of the existing culture. And certainly you might want to argue, oh, but China's doing great. Well, China isn't strictly Marxist or communist. They've had to take on a lot of capitalist behaviors and attitudes in order to get to where they are. Does that mean that I'm necessarily 100% pro-capitalist? No. Actually, I think what you need is a healthy balance between looking after the people who have less and need help, and, actually having a system where people are fairly paid for the work that they do. I don't think that should be inherently evil. I think that if you pay someone justly for some work that they do honestly and fairly, then that's not evil at all. That's actually justice. That is greater justice than taking money away from people who have worked hard to obtain it and giving it to people who have done nothing for it. Am I saying that I have no empathy for the poor? Absolutely not. I think that they should absolutely be given better opportunities. Do I think that would necessarily happen under Marxism? No. Typically under Marxism, people living in poverty don't do better. Typically they do worse. And yeah, it's not unusual for people to die just purely under the social injustices that emerge in a communist revolution, because, of course, as Marx said in his own writing, anybody who opposes you have to be willing to hurt or kill, because they're standing in the way of progress. Now, stop and consider that Marxists will typically say, oh, we're the more humane option, but also stop and notice that they're the only political system where their essential writings from Karl Marx himself encourage them to kill people who oppose them. Take that into account. Ask yourself, is communism really living up to any of its claims? And if it's not, you are well within your rights to reject it, and you don't have to justify that before anyone else. And if they want to question you on it, and if you want to argue about it, you can point that fact out, that Marxism and communism never deliver what they promise. It's just a historical fact.